You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Completely Fucking Clueless podcast. My name is Sarah Alice Liddy.
And my name is Audrey TT, and we both use she, her pronouns.
That we do. And we actually have another Sarah with us today. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. Do you go by Sarah or Sarah Ann?
I lately have been going by Sarah Ann, so let's stick with that.
Let's do Sarah Ann. Welcome to the Completely Fucking Clueless podcast. We're so excited to have you today. I actually, before we get into our more discussion, I said to Audrey, I was like, I have to start off with this. Have you been watching this season of Love is Blind at all?
Don't even get me started. I have had many a situation where I was like, God damn, there are not enough Sarah Anns known in this world. And then the one Sarah Ann that is now famous is probably one of the worst people ever. It's just like, oh, I can't. Yes, I have, to answer your question, yes, I have been watching.
It's just so funny. I was saying to Audrey, I was like, every time I say her name, not that you and the other Sarah Ann or anything alike, but I was like, I just keep thinking of Love is Blind.
Okay, maybe I changed my answer. Maybe I'll go by Sarah.
It's okay. Well, I'm Sarah too, and I have a middle name. Mine's actually, it's so funny, same initials. I'm Sarah Alice, and I never really used my middle name until Audrey kind of got us started with it with the podcast.
I would always make us say our full names because I like my last name so much that I make everyone say their full names.
Yeah. And I never really did that. But then I was embracing it. People usually in regular life, I'm just Sarah. But when I introduce myself, I'm Sarah Alice Liddy.
Ooh, I like it. It's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah. Rolls off the tongue. Well, thank you again for being here today. We're so excited to talk to you and get into it. Can you give the audience just a little bit of a rundown on who you are and what you do, especially what you post out on social media?
Yeah, so as we said, my name is Sarah Ann. I am 36. I'm a lot of things, but lately I'm somebody who's just trying to learn to love myself. And when I first started content creating about, more than 10 years ago at this point, it was very much to get connected. Yeah, to get connected. I started on LiveJournal. That's how long I've been doing this. I started with the intention to just learn to love my body. And then as I developed and sort of learned to love this part of myself, I realized that was just the tip of the iceberg. I started to really just figure out who I am as a person, both the things that I don't love about myself and the things that I do like. And I think that I've always just been a very open person. I'm a Gemini moon, if you know what that means. I love to talk about everything. So it's just I want to share this with the world. I want to show everyone that there's no harm in being in a version of yourself that doesn't know how to love every part of yourself. So that's what I try to do. I just try to show that there is no difference between me and somebody else, especially since I have come to a place of really loving my body and really not finding it to be the obstacle anymore. But while that is something that I always thought that I would struggle with, still having other parts of myself that I'm learning to love and just really showing what it is to be me, but also me in my 30s and me figuring out what that means for myself. So it's just about taking people on the journey of who I am in that given moment. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Your journey in starting social media 10 years ago when things were so different back then. What, besides your self-love journey, why did you reach, do you think, for showing it through the social media platforms that were available at the time?
There is a very, very specific reason why. And so I can recall this as if it was yesterday. I was in a bad relationship. This was the first person I ever dated who didn't dance around my body type. They actively liked my body type. And so that was a big deal. And I had seen these people online post their outfits. At this point, I had maybe 2 different outfits that I wore. One of them was stolen from my sister's closet. And I just wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to just find some way to be a part of this community that was ever so slightly changing my opinion on myself. And there was one time I was taking the subway home with my ex-boyfriend, and I just expressed that I had really wanted to be a part of it for myself. I just wanted to know what it was like to be a part of this community that was helping me so much. And he looked at me dead in the face and said, Sarah, there are so many people who are already doing that. I don't know why you would ever feel you would make an impact. And so, yeah, so when that relationship ended, I kind of just had this moment where I was wallowing. I was sad. I was really upset. It was probably the first really big heartbreak I ever had. And I just kind of, maybe it was out of spite or something, but something clicked where I was like, no, he doesn't get to tell me that this isn't going to be right for me. He doesn't get to tell me that this is something that isn't going to work for me. And lo and behold, I ended up doing it and doing it, and people really enjoyed what I had to say. And I was finding this incredible response. And so that's kind of why it may be my spiteful, glow up. I decided it was time to get on the internet and just start showing people that there was another person who wanted to be part of it. And it ended up working out. And it's now something entirely different. And I refuse to give him credit for credit is not due. But it was just such a beautiful experience to realize out of that really heartbreaking situation, I ended up doing something that really worked for me and made my life so much better. Yeah. So it was crazy. It was probably one of the most influential experiences of my life, despite it being probably one of the most painful.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's just such an ass thing to say. Why on earth is that necessary to say? What an absolute dickwad of a person just to say as a starter.
Literally. Yes. I know. It's like I'm thinking about it in like the context of my own life. I'm like, oh my God, like what if my partner had said that to me? Because it is like such a scary thing, and it's like a risk, and and you're putting yourself out there, which is so vulnerable. And then
to have your partner shut you down. That's
the one person who should be supporting you.
Yeah. I mean, you told us, a little bit like how you navigated it because you ended up like just doing it. But like in that moment, like how did you turn it around for yourself? Because it could have very easily gone the other direction where you just believed what he was saying. How do you think that you were able to, get to the point to actually just like launching and doing?
I wish I remembered exactly what it was. I really wish I remembered. I think it was just, I think when you go through hard breakups, a lot of what your partner said to you really sticks with you. Even if it's friendships, anyone that you have a separation from, a lot of what they say kind of just is on playback in your mind. And I think in all of that, I just had a single moment of clarity where I was like, no, this person doesn't get to determine what is right or wrong for me. And I kind of just started to look at him through the perception of, I started to look at myself through the perception of him, and how if he really did think that I could be something and he was feeling insecure about maybe me taking off and going off into this world that, like a lot of people will project onto you in those moments. And I think I just have a single moment of clarity, and I was able to act on that, even if it was just one post that was being made that was received well. And that's something I tell people is like, we have to make sure that when we are feeling some type of way or feeling hurt by what someone is saying, if we can, because I know it's so hard, try for a moment to understand what would inspire someone to say that to you. What would they gain from saying something so hurtful to you? What do they want the outcome to be? Was the outcome that he actually didn't want me to succeed? Was the fear that he didn't want me to go on the internet and succeed and do well? And why was that? And it was a hard thing to do. I was so sad. And mind you, there were a lot of passive aggressive posts being made towards him, but it ended up becoming something entirely different. And it really was just like that split second that I was able to catch the alternative thinking, and I was able to act on it. And that's you have to be mindful of that one split second, because that higher voice, that inner power, that like higher self will always come in to tell you, no, do not listen to this. Do not listen to those people. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you love someone, it's really hard to not accept what someone you care and value. It's hard to not take it as fact, even when it's something incredibly cruel. Of like, I know like my ex from like my past relationship, like there are still certain things that he said sort of in the wake of our breakup that I still, on days where I'm not feeling great, I'm like, was he right about that? Oh, maybe he saw the real me, and that I am like deep down this bad, cruel person. Maybe he was right. And it's like, no, the thing that someone says out of anger and cruelness and like reactionary, even if it was someone who loved you and knew you, they weren't necessarily right.
No, no. And I think I really subscribe to the mentality that there are no good or bad people. There are people who do a lot out of survival mode. There are people who do a lot to calm the insecurities and the fear of being not good enough, not lovable, charismatic enough, like, all the things that we're just trying to run from. And that unfortunately, without even intending to, we can end up hurting others. And if we all look at it from the perspective of people just trying to survive in the world, that so much of it becomes so less personal to you.
Yeah.
I've had so many people, even, not even just relationships that's ended horribly, but ex-friends who have said some pretty nasty things to me that, of course, that's really hard not to take personally. And of course, I'm always open to, like, I will specify this, but it's always important to listen to the feedback of people who love you. But there's a difference between people who love you and are saying it for your betterment and people who are saying things just to hurt you. And people who are saying things just to hurt you will say it with this like aggressiveness and this accusatory tone, or this sort of like, how do I even describe it? Just this like, you're this thing. Whereas someone who loves you will bring it to you very kindly and carefully and with consideration, knowing that you're so much greater than maybe this one thing that, everyone's weak spot. We all have a weak spot. And that's realizing the difference in delivery has been such a huge thing, because the delivery of that ex or your ex, there's an intention behind that. There's a purpose behind that. And what's their purpose? Their purpose is to make you small for their betterment, because they feel insecure about you going on a podcast and doing well for yourself and all of those things like that. They don't want you to grow because they feel threatened by your growth. And that's their problem. That's not your problem.
100%. I feel like a lot of the people that I was with, like in my like earlier 20s and like even in my like teenage years, just starting having relationships for the first time, like a lot of them kind of acted as your ex did in terms of like career things and just feeling like very intimidated and insecure. And it's very interesting to like look back and to think about that. And that's what your story is like making me think. And even like, as I was looking at your social media and, taking in your content, like, you had spoken about past relationships and, them not maybe being as positive, sometimes like maybe even abusive. And, I'm curious to hear, because something that I think I resonated with was like, this whole conversation about like desirability, and, being a plus size girl and growing up as like one as well, like sort of taking like what I got in a way, not like questioning if somebody liked me. It was more like, oh, this person likes me. Like finally somebody likes me. Like I'm just going to be with them. And, when they treated me a certain way, like not really doing anything about it because I was like, oh, well, I'm lucky. Like somebody enjoys me and my body. Can you talk about your experiences with that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my whole life, like if you interview people that I've known my whole life, like they would have told you that they never expected this version of me to exist. I never expected this version of me to exist. And so in my quest for feeling good about myself, I realized a constant theme was the feeling of desirability. I have had so many partners that I've slept with because I was seeking out the feeling of desirability without even knowing it. And it becomes so powerful when you don't realize what you're doing, what you're getting from it, the high that you're receiving from it. And I'd love to say that that's something that I have, completely quieted. It's not something that like, roars inside of me. It still very much exists, and it will exist, especially because the society we live in is still focused on our physical appearance. And it's still, we're still preferred to be a certain body type. And although I don't feel those same feelings about my body, those lingering feelings, I'll always carry that with me. And I think the thing that has made it different for me is being more selective now, mindfully selective of the people that I am sleeping with or engaging with in any particular way, and what feelings come up for me. I always implore people when they're at least a little bit aware of these feelings that are coming up, survey it, break it down, figure out what it's actually saying, because that is blanket statement I don't feel desirable, that's a powerful statement on its own. But what's underneath that? Well, when I don't feel desirable, I don't feel like I'm ever going to find love. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be wanted for who I am as a person. Okay, now I know what I really feel. How can I prove through all my experiences that that's not true? How can I take this thought and make it something that I can actively prove not to be true? And when I do that, I begin to take my power back. I begin to have control, a little bit more control over this feeling, over this thing that, I never asked to feel this way. I never asked to live in a world that made me feel like who I am is inherently unworthy. But I also think of myself sometimes as a best friend. If I had a best friend come to me, and I have had best friends come to me sort of telling me that the people that they're meeting are less than worthy in their eyes, or there's a lot of convincing themselves to like someone. I know we've all been there. But, if I were to think of myself as my own best friend, like what would I tell her? I would remind her
Yeah.
how beautiful she is and how worthy she is. And we can't always, like, we are all, our, as a person, when we talk to ourselves, we're always the exception to the rule. I can always excuse why all the things I share with other people doesn't apply to me. And that's something that
Yeah.
I still do to this day. I know so many people who still do that. But if I really start to just think of myself as like a different entity, which I can thank my therapist for, even if I hold a photo, if we take a photo of ourselves up, like if I look at myself 2 years ago, I sometimes have a conversation with her. I sometimes tell her it's going to get better. And then I think about myself 5 years from now and what she would want to tell me and what she would
Mm.
want to express to me. We talk a lot about going back to our inner child, but what would us in 5 years have to say to us? What
Yeah.
would she tell us to hold on for? If we spend so much time with the wrong person because they're validating a feeling inside of us, what are we missing out on? What are we missing in general? And it's not easy. It's one of the hardest things that I still to this day have to learn how to do, but it is not impossible. And that's the thing I have to remind myself of, because I've been able to, in moments, work against that feeling, but also in moments where I give into that feeling, try somehow in all of that to learn how to forgive myself for acting upon that feeling of wanting to be desired. It's such a human trait to want to feel
Yeah.
desired. Oops, sorry, I just dropped the computer for a second. It's such a
It's
human
okay.
feeling, and so to learn how to forgive yourself for something that is just like programmed into us is part of the journey as well. Like understanding that we're not going to ever get it 100% right.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, yeah, I 100% agree with all of that. It's such a interesting experience, and I do agree with you. And or actually not agree. I love the perspective that you were giving on, the 5 years from now version of yourself, cuz I never think about that.
It's really hard to conceptualize your future self. And like
Yeah.
Mm,
in so many ways, I find it so hard to care about my future self because it feels like an entire different person who it's like, well, that's a different problem. But I do think the like
mhm.
growth in so many aspects of your life can be so incredibly aided by caring about the
Future
future
you.
Mm.
you.
Yeah. That's
And
very,
future
very
you
true.
also doesn't always have to be 5 years from now. It can be next week.
Yeah,
What would
that's
she
true.
what would she have to say to you? Like what's something that she would say to you that, thinks that we could find relevancy for today? Like one thing I absolutely love doing for myself in hard moments, as I spent 3 months in New York and I was terrified the whole time. I struggle with anxiety so much. I'm neurodivergent. If I cannot conceptualize an idea, like I will panic, I will freak out. So right before I went to New York, and I would love to read it because I feel like this could help a lot of people. Right before I went to New York, I wrote something out for myself like 6 a.m. on the precipice of getting on the plane. And I can feel her anxiety. And I read it today and it still resonated and it still was so impactful. And I was just like, it's important to write letters to our future self too, because something
Mm.
we might say from the past could have impact for what we need to hear today. So there's always a version of ourselves that's trying to console us, to coddle us, to make ourselves feel better, because only we know what we need. Only we know what's going to help us in that moment. And I'm so proud of past me, but I'm also proud of future me too, who's figured it out. I hope she's figured it out, but she got here like somehow, like where there's I love this quote. I absolutely love this quote. There was a past version of you who wanted what you currently have.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that in thinking about all the things about where we're at and who we're with and all of those things. Like, there's a past version of us that's like jumping for joy over the fact that we are where we're at. And so the same thing can be said for ourselves now. Like, what if it all does work out? Like, what if it's beyond our wildest dreams? Which most of the times it is.
A
So,
hundred
yeah.
percent. It's so funny how like all the conversations we've recorded 2 episodes before this, and so many of the
All
conversations
overlapping.
they're all overlapping. So
in
my
like a
brain-
beautiful like invisible thread.
yeah,
sort of
I'm like,
way.
oh my goodness, if somebody like should listen to these 3 episodes
I know.
in tandem. But honestly, like going now, kind of taking a step back because into your 20s, I know that you talked about online how earlier in your 20s you did struggle with loving and accepting yourself. And so I kind of want to like go back there and have you talk about like where you were at that time, and then I'd be really interested also to hear like what triggered you to want to start your journey to finding love and acceptance for yourself.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I mean, who I was then was so vastly different from who I am now. Like, I didn't even like mirrors. I didn't
Mm.
like looking at myself. I was, it's a little bit embarrassing to say, but in just the spirit of being vulnerable, like um, I was so deeply depressed and so disconnected from my body that like I wouldn't even get out of bed. I sometimes wouldn't even brush my teeth because I just didn't care. I didn't care about myself. And so the pipeline from that to this is so convoluted, but it's so many different experiences in my life that happened that, again, I had that clarity. I had that moment of just, hey, wait a minute. This story that I've been telling myself my whole life, it's not true. It's not this death sentence for me to be plus size. And, unfortunately, it's hard to determine in that moment what's happening. But if we can just be mindful. And so, yes, it was very much dating that person and getting on the internet, but also seeing other people who looked very, very similar to myself. And they were doing things like
Yeah.
wearing an outfit that hugged their body, or wearing a cute outfit. Like, one of the things that I also felt pretty alienated with when I was younger was I had two sisters who were significantly smaller than me, and they always dressed really cute, and I always wanted to dress the same. And when we would go shopping as kids, my sisters would go to all the stores and I would go to Old Navy. I had one store that I could shop at, and that was a very like, it was a very isolating feeling. It didn't feel great. I just wanted to feel like I could be included. So I saw these people and I was like, wait, where are you getting that stuff? Like, where are you buying these things? And it was clothing, but it represented so much more. It was political in this way. It was impactful in this way to see someone else. And then I started taking risks. I can remember the intentional choices I made to do things that terrified me. I always felt very hyper visible going out to like eat, going to like, I'm shopping looking for clothing and I'm going to the food court. I don't want to go to the food court. What if someone sees me? What if someone sees me and like identifies me as like a fat person or all of those things? And it's going to feel very scary to feel hyper visible, but I did it. I did it and the world didn't come crashing down around me, or people didn't say anything, or maybe people did look. Okay, well, maybe people aren't looking because they're thinking bad things about me. Maybe people are looking thinking, it's kind of cool that she's eating out by herself. I'm in this craziness with me and 4 kids. I kind of wish that I could have that moment too. I created a different narrative than the one that I was used to, even though that was hard. And I always had my phone beside me with people who I intentionally kept in my circle who believed in this radical thing that I was trying to do, which was just try to love my body and just try to not feel like it was this obstacle to the things that I needed to do. And slowly but surely, as I made these decisions, as I faced the hard thing every day, it wasn't a situation of just one day waking up and realizing. It was realizing over time that my life was looking so different, that it was so different from where I had begun. I could look in the mirror. I cared about what I looked like. I enjoyed getting myself ready. I enjoyed going shopping. I enjoyed being out in public and going to get food with friends. I didn't care about what people were thinking about as much. And it might not happen overnight, but it does happen. And it isn't confidence isn't also this like attainable goal. Like it's not like the
Mhm.
final level of a video game. It's so
Right.
constant and up and down. And if we are prepared for, if we can be prepared for that journey, anything is possible. And it really is sometimes the smallest decision just to be like, I don't feel super comfortable in this, but maybe I'll wear it anyway. And I still
Yeah.
have moments like that to this day. Like I'm going out with some friends later and I'm just like, what do I want to wear? Well, maybe I'll wear the tighter thing. It's been a really long time since I've gone out. Maybe I'll just wear that. Nothing bad's going to happen anyway. Maybe people might even compliment me and say, "Oh, you look really good." I have days where I don't feel great about myself. And then I go out and people are like, "You look great." And I was like, the world is not crumbling around me. And it's not always about the way that we look. It's about the way that we feel inside reflecting the way that we look. But that all to me connects it all. I mean, also a Leo. I'm just going to I love astrology. Just going to put that out there. So that does matter to
Yes.
me. Being able to express myself big and bold and colorful matters to me. And I'm okay saying that out loud because I'm okay now recognizing what I need to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you also feel that as you have gotten older, it has been easier to not care as much about what people think about you?
Yes, I mean, I'm not 100% there yet, but there really is this transition from your 20s where you feel like everyone's watching you to your 30s,
Yes.
realizing everyone is paying attention to themselves only. I did this amazing like I had this amazing experience a while ago where we had to like walk through this like visualization of closing your eyes and like thinking everyone was like staring at us only to realize everyone was just too busy thinking about themselves to give a crap about what everyone else was thinking about them. And I was like, that is exactly what it is. We are all way too concerned with ourselves to really care that much of what other people are thinking about us. It's still, of course, upsets me and bothers me when I like give it too much power and thought. But your 30s become this moment of you just being able to really absorb the lessons in your life. The
Mm.
30s are you'll mess up, but you'll learn. Your 20s are you're going to keep messing up and you're going to keep falling on your face and you're going to keep making mistakes. Let yourself do that. Be there. Make as many mistakes as you need. Your 30s are when those mistakes and those lessons will really start to implement and make you a person. They'll make you more of who you are. And I'm so thankful for my 30s, even though I spent so much time being scared of my 30s, because I feel like I'm becoming a, a more complete version of myself, a happier version of myself. Like, I can stay in my lane a lot more easy than I ever did before. And I feel like other 30-year-olds are still struggling to get it, but that's part of being in your 30s is just struggling, but grasping a little bit more, absorbing a
Mm.
little bit more, which is kind of lovely. It's like, I feel like I've learned some of my most important lessons in my 30s, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That is like truly like one of the biggest joys of getting older is learning that like, hey, getting older's great. Of like I have a really cool thing of I'm the last of 6 kids and we span 20 something years, and like with every passing year I see my oldest sister come more and more into herself and become like just like almost glow more and
Mm.
more. Like she's 47 now, turning 48 this year, and like she just like with every passing year becomes like more brilliant and more confident, and it is like such a gift that I've gotten to watch and something that I'm so excited about experiencing, because it would
That's
be nice to not feel
amazing.
like I'm falling on my face all the time.
But that's the beauty of it. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be an age where we don't fall on our face. I
Yeah.
I know some 50-year-olds who are still falling on their face, but I see like 40-year-olds now who are just like, "Oh, just wait until you hit your 40s." Like, and I'm excited about my 40s now because I also understand like part of growing up and learning is falling on your face. It's
Mhm.
doing it but also learning the skill of getting up, which is I think a lot harder to do with grace in your 20s, but that's okay. That is
Yeah.
absolutely okay. I fell on my face plenty of times and oh my god, too many times in my 20s. Way too many times.
Is there like a specific time that really like sticks out to you?
Just the all of 20s really, like it is like a whole
Fair.
like the whole
Same.
experience,
Fair.
the whole thing like I definitely like I got into a bad relationship in my 20s, and I didn't know the art of leaving a relationship that wasn't right for you. Like it was really just a lot of like bad friendships, bad decisions, drinking a lot, like, you know, all of these things that I think that like as much as I can look back and be a cringe a little bit like about those things, I'm so thankful that I experienced that because it taught me something that I needed to know. I really
Yeah.
don't think that I mean, there's a lot of things that obviously I wish I hadn't gone through, but there's also a lot of things that had I not gone through, I don't know that I would be who I am today. I don't think that I would have be someone who's capable of seeing all areas of life and taking that in and being able to just sit somewhere in the middle for pretty much everything without that experience, without having been such a complicated mess of a person sometimes. Like one of the reasons why this podcast speaks to me so much is because I am completely fucking clueless, even in my 30s, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
and I love having friends who are completely clueless because we get to be completely clueless together, and that is
Hmm.
beautiful. I love that. Let's all figure it out together because there's not going to be a single point in life where we don't get it. We don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. I feel like, you know, obviously as we get older, like we learn words, we learn and understand ourselves more, but also like there's just new challenges and new things that pop up that, you know, you're uncertain about. And you're right. Like I think it is so nice going through it with people in your life. Like I think, you know, at least I think this has been our experience. Like at the beginning, like you kind of try and hide it, like I've got this together. But then once you, I think, have that first big experience where you're just like, I just don't know what's happening and I need support. And you finally like let down that guard and you let these people in your life like really see you. And then, you know, you can make this connection off of just like not knowing what the fuck is going on. I mean, especially for us in our 20s, I feel like, you know, we're constantly like turning the corner of like, okay, I'm understanding this. And then it's like another thing happens and you're just like, oh, I'm down again. So it's such a unique experience.
Yeah, and let me tell you that doesn't change in your 30s, but that's okay. I
Yeah.
have I have people who are older than me who tell me it's still going to happen, and but there's like this calm that comes with saying that I'm just
Mm,
like I'm still trying to get to that place, but I'm so much closer than I ever was because I think also the pressure when you're transitioning from your 20s, like I noticed during my later 20s, this pressure I put on myself to just like get it, to
mm,
understand, to have it all figured out because I was like,
yeah.
I'm transitioning into my 30s. I'm supposed to have it, right? Like they told me I'm supposed to have it all by my 30s. I don't have it yet. So anytime I would make a mistake, I would beat myself up more. There was more pressure that came from that. And then I transitioned into my 30s and I was like, wait a minute, nobody knows what they're doing here. Like, why did nobody tell me this before I got here? And then I realized like the beauty of being in my 30s was just having a lot of those similar experiences from my 20s, but in a way where I wasn't putting as much pressure on myself to just like
Mm,
have known better. Like there's so many things that you're going to go through like you said that it becomes different problems as you get older, but it doesn't become like it's not the end of the world the way that it was for me in my 20s. Like everything was the end of the
mm,
world in my
yeah.
20s. It Yeah, and I don't miss that feeling at all, but like,
Yeah.
you know, and like even
It,
my early 30s was definitely that feeling too. And then it was just like, okay, it happened. The world didn't end.
yeah.
Let's move
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like in your 20s, like things can feel a lot more catastrophic.
Because everything's
Mhm.
so new. And so,
Yeah.
like, the first time you deal with something, it feels impossible and like no one has ever survived this before. But the
Mhm.
more you get
Mhm.
under your belt,
Yeah, the better it all like becomes. And you know, you spoke a little bit about this kind of being like afraid of your 30s. Like, can you speak a little bit to that? Like, why did you think you felt afraid to enter that decade? And was it because like because I know I just turned 26 a couple weeks ago. I still have like obviously a couple years of my 20s left, but a part of me is also already thinking about those expectations that kind of
Mhm.
surround turning 30. So, can you speak about your experience with that?
Yeah, so to give you an idea again of who I was, when I went from 19 to 20, It was
Yeah.
the worst experience of my life. I was so scared because I think it's the feeling of leaving perceived youth. When I left my
Yes.
20s, I felt like I was leaving behind something that I could never have again. Like,
Mm,
if I fell on my face, like we do in our 20s, I felt like I would be penalized more for it, or there would be this, this experience because admittedly, when I met someone who was in their 30s and they messed up and they did, well, you're in your 30s, you should know better. And then I hit my 30s and I realized how hurtful that was because our 30s are no different than our 20s in a lot of ways. But I think the reason why I feared it so much wasn't just because of that. It was also because I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I was still living with my parents. I didn't move out of my parents' house until I was 30 years old. And I felt so much shame. I felt so much shame around that. And I saw so many of my friends, move out and do all these things and have all these experiences. I had friends who got pregnant right out of high school. I had friends who
wow.
were like married and bought homes. And then I was like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have those things? And so as the clock was ticking and I was getting closer, I was so much more aware of what I didn't have, and it made me blind to the things that I did have, which was a clean slate.
Mm,
And I would talk to these friends who had kids straight out of high school, who got married really young, who did all those things. And although they were happy with their life, they felt like they didn't have enough time to be young, to be a 20-year-old with a clean slate. And then I just started to change my perspective a little bit. Okay, well, if I get to go into my 30s without all of these things, that I still do want someday, what does that mean for me? And in a weird way, the transition from my 20s to my 30s didn't feel as painful as 19 to 20 because my 30s ended up becoming, I don't know, it's just like it was almost like this immediate excitement because then I also got to be in my baby 30s. I was my babies. Like I wasn't like a young or an older 20-year-old anymore. I was like my baby 30s. So I don't know, it was just like it felt like the clock reset a little bit. And once I just kind of like accepted that I wasn't gonna have those other things that I thought I needed in order to be like a successful 30-year-old, I realized there was so much more available to me as a 30-year-old than I ever really had as a 20-year-old. But yes, absolutely, it was just so much comparison for the people that I knew in my life or some of the people that I knew in my life. And, the internet can be great for so many things, but I started like following other 30-year-olds who were similar to
yeah.
me, who didn't have, the life that I thought I would have. But like I also now can't picture myself having had a kid or marriage or all of those things. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do some of the things that I've done that I'm so thankful for. And what we feel we lack can also clear up space for things that like we could have never anticipated in our wildest dreams.
Yeah, 100%. I really resonated with, the idea of like leaving your perceived youth. Like, I do think that we were just having a conversation with someone else about this like idea that like your 20s is like the best time of your life. It's the only time when you can have fun and be young and like
Mm,
da 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 da. And then as you get older, like that just all of a sudden goes away, and how actually that is like not the reality like whatsoever. And I can say that rationally out loud right now and still have the anxiety girl in my head being like, oh no, girl, like it's gonna end. So it's like I know I'm saying it out loud, but like there's also pieces of me that do worry that those fears and anxiety thoughts will like manifest.
That it
mhm.
won't end up all coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing. Even if we think that, it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it, like manifest into the reality because I felt those same things. I had those same fears. And I think that I tried to do everything in excess in my 20s. Everything I
Mm,
experienced, I tried to experience to the excess of whatever I could. And because much like you probably feel now, I felt like the clock was running out for me. Like I had to have it all figured out. But that's the beauty of it. It doesn't. And there are so many fun things that I don't even know are coming for me. Like I love my 30s, but I keep having people tell me like, just wait until your 40s. And I was like, I'm terrified of my 40s. Admittedly, I feel like my 40s are like the same feeling I had when I was hitting my 30s, where I was like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's coming, But I also understand the beauty of aging now. Like I've had so many people in my life pass young. My grandmother was 33 when she passed away, and I'm older than she was now. And I feel like I get to live a life that she didn't. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when we get to experience life to the fullest. And what is the alternative? The alternative
Yeah.
is not getting to experience that. So your 20s are a beautiful time, your 30s are a beautiful time, your 40s and your 50s and your like it's all beautiful because we don't know how much better it can get. We don't know what's waiting for us. And absolutely in your 20s, experience it all. Fall on your face as many times as you need. Get into relationships, kiss as many people as you can, go out, do what you got to do. Like, do that and know that it's all going to be okay. Like, it is truly and honestly all going to be okay. In the same way that, like, when I have a cousin who's in high school telling me, like, what do I do? Like, if we talk to like high school aged people, like you as 20-year-olds, like you're right there ready for with the advice. Like it is, I promise you, the exact same way. It is the exact same way. Like you're just like, oh honey, come on. Like it gets so much, it's there's so much more life than your high school. It's like, I feel like I'm an elderly person being like, oh honey, it gets better. But like, it truly does. It truly, truly does.
It's so funny you talking about high school because my roommate and I were like reflecting on so much of the stuff that went on for us in high school. And I'm just like, we were looking back and we were like, oh my gosh, like some of that stuff felt like the biggest thing in the world. Like we never like
We were so high stakes over so much dumb
oh
shit.
my god, so
I know, oh
high
my God.
stakes, so high stakes, and it's just like so funny to like look back at those times and being like, oh my gosh, like don't you worry, like child.
I know. And that's the thing. It's like that, I think, is sometimes what it is to access your higher self. I'm such a, I love spirituality. As I'm sure you've noticed, I've mentioned astrology so many times. I love spirituality, but I really have found so much in people just telling me to try to access my higher self and see what
Mm,
she's got to say to me. Because, I've had moments where I felt like I've kind of felt this calm and just knowing, okay, everything can still kind of feel like the end of the world, but it's going
yeah.
to be okay because these issues will mean absolutely nothing. And then I look back at things that felt like the end of the world, even my early 30s, and I was like, wait, what was that again? I can't even remember the details of a situation that I am absolutely certain kept me up all hours of the night. Like it was just, it really, I don't think that feeling ever truly, truly goes away, but there's a, there's an, there's a calm, or rather a limit to how much you can feel that as you get older, as like the catastrophizing of things doesn't go to the extent that it did in your high
Yeah.
school years or in your 20s. Like, oh my god, same like you, I catastrophized everything was the end of the world, because also that was our entire world, was our high school years. Like
Right.
we didn't know
Yeah.
anything other than being a high schooler, and like your friend was dating like this person, and there was like some, like there's, oh my god, now we have to like go like get in a fight to like protect their honor. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like it was always the end of the world. And it's the same thing, except it doesn't consume you as much as it used to. It really does. It's I feel so much freer in a way that I
Mm,
haven't ever before. Yeah.
yeah, that's really beautiful. And that's like good to know. And yeah, it's interesting, talking when we talk with people that are in decades older than us, because it really just seems like there are so many common threads that really do come into play with just like, things just don't feel as, crazy or as big, or you've handled
Mhm.
them before. So you don't, put so much stress and things like that. Something that I did want to ask is, for people that are in their 20s and struggling with like self-love or acceptance, like what do you recommend to them?
To 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 honestly, I think there are so many different facets to it. But the first thing that I did was I had to look at the types of people that I was interacting with on a daily basis. I think
Mm,
there's beauty there. I think there's beauty in having people who we can relate to in our struggles, but sometimes if all we are around and all we know are other people who are feeling insecure and also sort of expressing these like sentiments of hating our bodies or even ourselves, like it becomes kind of our whole world. We don't realize there's so much beyond that. So I think the first thing that I had to do was look at the types of people that I was interacting on a daily basis and also the type of content that I was interacting with on a
Yeah.
daily basis. To some, it might seem ridiculous to be so strict about what it is that I look at or who I talk to, but it saved my life. It
Mm.
really did save my life because it gave me an alternative perspective. It gave me the ability to recognize that the things that I was feeling about myself, like there was an alternative perspective to that. So that was the first thing that I had to do. And as I mentioned previously, like I know it's cheesy to say it, but just do something that scares you. Maybe not every day, like, because that's hard, but do it as often as you can. Like, we all have things about ourselves or our world or our body that scares us, but like, what is something that we can do for ourselves? And what if we do it and even the worst case scenario happens? Like, what if I did go out to lunch and someone did say something to me? Would that have been the end of the world? Like, would I have even thought about that person 5 years from now, or would have just happened? Like,
Mm.
so doing that and challenging my beliefs about myself was probably single-handedly the best thing that I could do. And again, fashion is something that for me is so beyond just like putting on a pretty dress. It's political for me. It's a active empowerment. It's also a way to connect with my body that I never thought that I could. So, sometimes it's just actively like putting on a piece of clothing that scares you and having your
Mm.
phone ready or FaceTiming with someone when you're out somewhere. Like I FaceTime the hell out of people when I'm feeling anxious. Like I have people like in my ear and I'm, talking to them and telling them how I'm feeling. And those things really do end up amounting to one day just feeling so much less insecure in ourselves. And then eventually we can take off the training wheels and do it ourselves. We can,
Yeah.
oh, the sound of the New York siren just it
I
makes me
know.
so happy. It's like, it's nostalgia. I
I
always say
know.
this to people. I always say it's like
No,
it gets in your gut when you hear it. It's so crazy. It's
it's funny. I was saying to Audrey, I was like, "Oh yeah, like it's okay to podcast with the windows open. That's just like the nature of
Yeah.
podcasting in New York. You hear the sirens,
We
and
luckily there hasn't been too much noise today.
yeah,
We've been lucky.
yeah." And then you were
I
like,
love
"No,
it
like
though.
sometimes it can get noisy." I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay."
I wouldn't have it any other way. I truly wouldn't have it any other way. I love New York ambiance. But anyways, to get back to what I was saying, there are so many little things that you can do, and I feel like in some ways it really is about who you are as a person, what you need. But I know for me it was like just a matter of like small little things that I was doing every single day, and having people who are going to be on that journey with you, and maybe being friends with someone or meeting someone or following someone who's already gotten there, so you can just like slightly alter your perception. If it's a matter of like body image issues, I purposely went out of my way to find people who had like big bellies like me and were dressing, you know, in ways that like I always wanted to. And I was like, wait a minute, you're what? And I was like, they can do it. Why can't I? And like
Yeah.
just recognizing that like there's no difference between myself and someone else that I might, just put on a pedestal and make out to be this like being that I could never be.
Mm.
It's small intentional choices that do end up making a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Yeah, I'll never forget the day that like I realized that I didn't need like 2016 Instagram was just like a different place, and I was following a lot of people that didn't look like me, and I maybe I was listening to a podcast. I don't know what but something or I heard to like start following people that look like you, that have your body
Mhm.
type, and I started going on this journey of on Instagram of finding other like plus size women, and it was such a game changer for me when I started following people on social media that looked like me, that I could like you said, like go to for like fashion recommendations and things, because I also struggled when I was younger. Like, oh my God, like all these people get to wear this like cute stuff. Like, what about me? Like, what do I wear? Like, how do I want to express myself? And so I really do resonate with that and think it was like one of the biggest game changers for me in terms of like my journey with my acceptance for myself, to follow people that looked like me and who were experiencing similar things as me. Like, something that I've loved about like interviewing other plus size women on the podcast is like this like common experience in like childhood of like feeling like you were the friend that like stood out and that like, you know, didn't get the attention, or like, you know, didn't fit into other of the friends' clothes. And that's just like kind of brought like so much of my inner child like peace. Like, you weren't alone back then when you thought you were. So I love to hear your tips and the small steps and intentional steps, because I do think that it is such a game changer.
Yeah, honestly, even just having friends that I could borrow clothing from, like you, like I'll
Yeah.
never, yeah, that feeling is so powerful. Like it seems so small and it seems so insignificant, maybe to like the outside world if you've never experienced it yourself. But like, yeah, when you go to a friend's house and you like can't even put on like a cardigan, that hurts. Like there's this really isolating feeling that comes with that. This feeling of just like, what's wrong with me? Like, I also grew up in the 90s where, like, I mean, it's all bad now, but like, I grew up when like people were really, really,
Yeah.
really like the Britney Spears era where it was like everyone had to be so impossibly thin, and
Mm.
and having other friends who were also very thin, like it makes you feel so isolated and alone,
Yeah.
and having other people who can understand that and also understand how important it is to, you know, just actively work against that is great. And I'm so proud of you for like actually knowing how to make little changes in your day, like following other people. Cause like that can be hard too. When you're in the cycle, it can be hard to do something to get off of that and get off that roller coaster and just try something different, and how much just doing that and seeing other people who look like you can make a difference in your life. Like I am nothing if not for the people who like paved the way for me.
Mm. Yeah, I just feel like it's like social media is such a crazy place, but like something that I do get like such comfort from is getting to watch people who look like me like live their life and succeed and do amazing things. Because I like, while I didn't grow up in the 90s, like we grew up in the early 2000s, and like there was still like remnants of that, and still, you know, there wasn't a lot of,
Heroin chic.
yeah, like there
Oh
wasn't this,
God.
yeah, like, you know, as much like, I don't want to say
Body
body.
positivity hadn't quite become
Yeah.
like the buzzword that it has become today.
Yeah, I
No.
agree. I
I
agree.
can't even imagine what it was like to grow up in that era as well, right? Like when the precipice of like the internet becoming so much more a part of our everyday lives. Like, you know, for me, I remember being able to go home and like you would go on the computer, but like that was the computer. That wasn't like your everyday life. But
Mm,
now I don't even understand. Like I feel so much compassion and empathy for like kids now who like the internet is like this entity in all of our lives. And I can't imagine how scary that must be sometimes to feel like, you know, it's part of your high school life, your early 20s,
yeah.
like all of those stuff. So like I have so much compassion and so much like empathy towards people today and your generation as well, like, and but I'm also so proud of your generation for like stopping it, for trying to do something different, for being such a big part of the conversation, because you know, like we are all nothing without each other in this. Like we are all part of the conversation in such an important way. Like I can learn so much from you two, and like, you know, vice versa. Like there's so much like to see you two start a podcast and have these conversations. That's a huge deal. That's such an important part of the conversation that like that's going to change a lot of people's lives, and like in a big way. And that takes a lot of like gusto, that takes a lot of strength, that takes a lot of, you know, ability to just do something different. So like I'm thankful for these conversations and for people like you who do what you do, because it's going to change a lot of lives. Even
Likewise,
yours.
likewise. I know.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And likewise, I mean, like, again, like, it's very inspiring for me to look at your content and see how you put yourself out there. And it gives me, like, hope for myself and strength for myself. Anyways, our last question for you is, when is a recent time that you felt clueless?
Okay, so honestly, most recently, I live on my own, but like I had
Okay.
a situation where something broke in my apartment and I was just like clueless to the point where I was just crying because I was like, how do I do it? It's so hard. It is so hard to take care of everything yourself, but I just like took a
Literally.
moment. Yeah, it was as simple as like I don't know what it's called, but you know that thing in your bathtub where like you pull it out to like change like where the water comes out. That's how
Yes.
clueless I am. I don't even know the name of this thing. So it just broke on me and I just really wanted to take a bath. Like I really just needed like a hot bath. I couldn't get it. And I was just so upset with myself that I couldn't figure this out. I was like, my fingers were all like red and sore from like trying to like pull this thing out. I was like, wait a minute. I realized I had a tool like 2 days later and I figured it out. I fixed it like that. And it's like, I did this in 2 seconds, but I was so clueless. I felt so upset because I was like on my own and I couldn't figure it out on my own. And everything seems so much scarier when you have to figure it out on your own. But I just
Yep.
ended up managing to figure it out after like 2 days of being completely like, what do I do? Is it just broken forever? I could never take another bath for the rest of my life. It was the worst.
I feel that. I feel you with the alone thing. I feel like whenever I'm having a moment where I'm just like clueless or like emotional, I call my partner and I'm like, I am a baby. Help me, please. Like, I needed somebody to help navigate me.
I'm a baby always. I'm gonna be 70 years old and I'm still a baby. I need to always be a baby.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for coming on the podcast. Can you let everybody know where they can follow you?
Yes, so you can find me pretty much everywhere under Tons of Blush, TONSA Blush. And then I think on YouTube I'm Sarah Ann Blush. So yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was my first ever podcast. I've been so nervous. So nervous.
This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.